Have you ever looked calm and successful on the outside while inside your mind is racing? You're worrying about everything and you simply cannot switch off. If so, today's episode is just for you. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Alison McQuinney podcast, where we have conversations about business and wellbeing success. And today, I'm very pleased to welcome a lovely lady, Amanda O'Rourke. Amanda, a warm welcome to the podcast. Amanda O'Rourke is an executive coach who helps business leaders to shine and is the go-to leadership coach for high achievers over 35. Her coaching helps give leaders more energy, more influence, and better results in 90 days. Amanda's coaching has transformed more than 100 leaders. Today, we will be talking about high-performing anxiety. Amanda, a very warm welcome to the podcast. I would like to start off by asking, what exactly is high-performing anxiety?
Well, thanks very much for the introduction, Alison. I would say, for me, high-performing anxiety can take many different forms, but I'd give you a metaphor to start with. It's the swan. It's above ground, above the water. Everything looks elegant. Everything looks in control. Everything looks in its place and as it should be. Whereas under the water, it's a whole different story, and the paddles are going, 90 to the dozen. And I think I use that as a metaphor so people can kind of understand that it's actually about how you look as opposed to how you feel. And so how you look is above the water, how you feel is below the water. And one of the things I think it's really important to qualify is actually it's about the mind versus the outward body. So outwardly you can look, perfectly normal, but inside your mind is racing. You may have high blood pressure. You may have stomach issues, all the things that sometimes go hand in hand with normal anxiety, sort of general anxiety disorders. But with high performing anxiety, it's not evident. You can't see it.
I think there have been occasions when I've been that swan, I'll be honest with you.
Mm.
It does resonate. Is high-performing anxiety a recognised medical condition?
I think it's not a symptom or a diagnosed, sort of qualified medical condition as such, but it's recognised within the general anxiety disorders that you can actually find. When you're looking at anxiety disorders and the symptoms, there are very many similar ones that you'll find with high performing anxiety, but actually, like I said, it's not as clear and evident. So things like panic attacks isn't necessarily something you would experience if you were high performing anxiety, or if you did, they would be in private. They wouldn't be outside, and you wouldn't be showing them to anybody. It's that whole, I think with high performing anxiety, it's that whole, what is this going to look like to other people? And it's, I have to look a certain way.
So it's very
So
hidden.
yes, yes.
Why do so many high achievers experience this kind of anxiety?
I think it's the pressure to perform. I think it's the pressure to be a certain way, to model certain behaviors, and to not show certain traits.
Mm.
So what I'm talking about there is generally it's about emotion. It's that expectation that you don't show emotion. You just keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's a kind of a paradox there, because you're you're not keeping calm. You're carrying on and you're looking calm, but you're not feeling it.
Mm.
And there's a big difference there. And I've done both in the past, and the effects on your body are very different when you actually don't feel calm.
If you're a line manager, are there any warning signs that you should be looking out for in your team for possible high performing anxiety, or is it so hidden that it's impossible to tell?
I think there are signs, but you'd have to be quite canny to spot them, I
Yep.
think. You'd have to know somebody quite well. Somebody who's always driven may actually have high performing anxiety, but they may not. But I think it's spotting the people who never say no to things. So if you've got somebody who will always do whatever you ask them to do, even if it means them staying late at night, that's possibly somebody who is unable to, instill proper boundaries, and that then brings on high performing anxiety, or it can actually be part and parcel of it. It's also looking at people who are um, anxious in insofar as their behavior can be erratic. So it's difficult. You have to know somebody quite well, because I say this because when I was suffering with anxiety in this way, nobody would have known. I had people
Mm.
say to me, "Oh, Amanda, you've got all of it. You've got everything," and they were praising me and thinking that I had got it all sorted. And I just remember thinking, "You have no idea."
Do you think that people with high performing anxiety can feel like they're never doing enough, even though actually others would consider them successful?
Yes, yes, I do, and I think that is because the driver is the next thing. So they very rarely celebrate wins, so it's always on to the next thing. And it's driven by this need to achieve, this need to produce. And that can be learned in very, in our very infancy,
Mm.
where you're praised for achievement, and as parents, you don't mean to, sort of damage your children in a way, because it's natural to go, oh, well done, but actually what we need to do also is praise the effort, which I think people are starting to do, and people do now. But it's actually recognizing that when you are only praising achievement, then you learn to achieve to get attention,
Mm.
and it can be a derailer.
Yes. How can you tell whether your drive to succeed is just healthy ambition or high performing anxiety?
I think that's the way you feel.
Mm.
I think that's the way you react to when things don't go well. When you're high performing, you always aim for perfection, and 9 times out of 10 you don't achieve it. I think perfection doesn't really exist.
Mm.
But actually, if you don't reach your standard, then what I notice in the people I work with is that they're really hard on themselves.
Mm.
And when I work with people who are just simply ambitious, they have learned to be resilient against those feelings, and actually know that it's not true what they're
Mm.
saying to themselves, and so they can bat it back. But actually, it's about learning to distinguish whether you're feeling good about something or not. And I think anybody who's listening to this who has suffered with anxiety of anything know that that feeling is not good, and it's instantly recognizable as something destructive rather than something productive.
Yep. And is it possible to switch off and relax if you have this condition, or is it just constant?
I think you might be caught in a loop, and I think that's the issue. Certainly, it was my experience, was that you feel trapped. You don't feel that you can actually escape it. I mean, I'm here today to tell you you definitely can, but I am very sympathetic to the feeling that people have when they think this is who I am, and this is just the way I've always been, and I can't change that.
Mm.
I think it's easy to get into that kind of loop of I, there's no way off this treadmill.
Would you say that current trends in social media can make this kind of anxiety even worse?
I think so. I think it's such a shame, really, because when we grew up, we compared ourselves to probably 20, 30 people. And now the younger generations are comparing themselves to millions.
Mm.
And we both know that, there's the famous phrase, comparison's a thief of joy. And the minute you start to pitch yourself against the next person who you don't frankly know very well and fall short, you'll always find yourself wanting. So you'll always feel less than.
Yeah.
And so that can then feed into this feeling of, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, I need to do more, I need to try harder. And it's self-destructive in that respect.
Over time, how does this kind of anxiety affect performance at work?
That's such an interesting question. For me, it damaged my sleep.
Mm.
So I actually stopped sleeping very well as a result of this because, I think I probably had cortisol in my system all the time. That's, the stress hormone. And so I would wake in the middle of the night and it would interrupt my sleep. And that then made me irritable. It made me clumsy. It made me, frankly, not very nice to be around. So the anxiety was I'm not sleeping very well, and then that looped into I'm never going to sleep very well, and so you get anxious about sleeping as well as
Mm.
anxious about everything else. So it's really difficult to kind of break that cycle, but there are ways and means you can do it.
And how does this type of anxiety affect leadership and decision making if you're in that kind of position?
I think it makes it's very difficult to be you if you're in
Mm.
this position because you're performing. You actually are not being true to yourself in that you're doing what's expected of you rather than how you naturally would be. And I think that's something that I saw and I see with people that I work with is that they don't feel they can take their whole selves to work, which is what's being encouraged by their culture that their businesses are encouraging, but they feel that if they did that, they would be punished somehow, penalized in terms of promotion or so I think you've got to be very careful about what you do in those situations. But I would always encourage somebody to be themselves
Mm. Mm.
because I think the more you can bring you to this world, the better it will be.
Yeah.
That's who you came to be, and that's who you want to be. We all want to express ourselves as ourselves. And so I think what happens when you are in a position of leadership, if you're not able to be that whole self, then nobody gets the benefit of all of you.
Yeah. I think workplace culture is so important and is one area that's so often got wrong.
Yes.
What can organisations do to reduce high performing anxiety?
I think that's about interventions myself.
Hmm.
I think that, I mean, I've worked on a program where we were coaching hundreds of leaders across a space of time, and we noticed an immense change in the culture because of paying attention to the individual rather than the whole. And I think what we don't see, I guess, when we're thinking about culture is that that is a collection of individual people creating that culture. And that culture is a collective, it's a collaboration of those people. And the better you make those people in terms of their well-being, the better that culture will be. And the more adaptive people will be, the more creative they will be. And so I think in terms of what the organizations can do is they can look to their individuals and ask for feedback. Now, whether they'll get honest feedback is a different thing, but I think engagement surveys are helpful, but I think there is work to be done there as well.
Mm.
Because I think again you have what they call the halo effect where people will praise people because they think that's what they ought to do. Or because they like their manager, they'll praise them, whereas doesn't necessarily mean that that manager is a good manager
Yeah.
of the work. So I think it's about finding ways and means that they can actually tap into the individuals, and that could be coaching programs, it could be training to help open up the organization to speak more about their feelings and how they can grow together.
Do you think people should tell their line manager if they have high performing anxiety?
Now, there's the key, I think, is do they actually know they've got it?
Mm,
Because, like I said, when you grow up as somebody like I did, was, complete overthinker, worry about a lot of things, you don't define it. You don't look at it and go, oh, I've got high performing anxiety. We didn't have the labels that we have now.
no, very true.
And therefore, I just thought, this is who I am. It's just me. I'm odd, and I never really talked about it openly to somebody who would relate. I never admitted that this is the way I was, unless it was really sort of a close friend outside of the business or the corporation I was working for. So I think it's really difficult in that respect. I think one of the things that I would encourage people to do is look at their symptoms and maybe write them down and maybe put them into Google and see if it brings anything up for them, but actually not to necessarily to label them, but to see what's available for them in terms of general advice. I mean, we've got some things to share, I know, but it's actually about you finding what works for you. And this is what I did. Was I actually made a decision that I needed to change, and then I put in steps to make those changes because I got to the point where I intuitively knew I was going to make myself very ill. I was going to burn out.
Mm,
And I think this is the difficulty. And we call it the high achievers paradox, is where they work hard, they achieve, but then that's not enough, so they keep going, and and there's never enough. It's never good enough, um, and that pathway leads to burnout because it's all about doing. It's all about more. And the coaching I work around is about that balance of being and doing. And what I find, and it was me as well, is that high achievers are really good at doing, not so good at being.
mm. Can you recover from high performing anxiety?
In my experience, I did, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can.
And what tips do you have for achieving that?
So, how long have you got? So, the one thing I would say is that the normal practice, I think, is the advice is to, oh, you just need to go and meditate. And actually, one of the things I found was that I wanted to meditate when I was in this state, but it was often inaccessible to me. I just couldn't do it. And I remember a couple of times it brought me to tears that I just couldn't calm my mind down. And I think that's the first thing I think is to realize that your mind isn't against you. And it's about making peace with that, first of all. So rather than trying to calm your mind down, I would say try and calm your body first. So do something that brings your body into a state of calm. And that could be exercise.
Mm,
It, it could be simple walking or something to get yourself out of your head and into your body. And that's the kind of the being aspect I was talking about, because I think it's that natural assumption that we need to do more, but actually, it's actually about maybe doing less sometimes. So calming the body is the first thing I would suggest. And like I said, you can do that by exercise, but it's also about just, you know, taking breaks, sitting down and just allowing your mind to just wander. Allow yourself to get bored. Put your phone away. Allow your mind to just drift. And that's hard to do to start with if you've got, a mind that works at like 500 miles an hour. But you can do it with practice. And this is the boring part, I think, about recovering from anything that's, sort of related to this sort of thing, is about its practice. It's about breaking the habit of being the way you were. And so you can do that by installing new habits. I absolutely love Atomic Habits by James Clear, by the way. If anybody's not read it, I recommend it highly because he talks about creating new habits. And I think that's really helpful for somebody who's very logically minded and needs to
mm,
know how to do something. So it's about when you're creating a new habit, it's about you can habit stack is what he calls it, which is where you add it onto an already existing habit. So what can you do first thing in the morning that will enable you to feel calmer? And it may well be that you have a glass of water in the morning. So when you have your glass of water in the morning, you step outside and have 5 minutes just, outside in your garden, or, you know, the front of your flat, whatever, so that you can actually get a bit of natural fresh air and some sunlight, hopefully.
Mm.
And then it's all about, when you're calming your mind, you can go into the ideas of meditation or listening to guided meditation. And I think one of the things I find really helpful when people don't know how to do this is I encourage them to do box breathing, which is, the Navy SEALs use this, and it's about you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, and then you hold for 4, and then the square is complete, and you keep going. And what that does is it helps you to reset your nervous system. And I've had people do this before interviews. I've had them do it before they've had to have a difficult conversation with a colleague. I've had them do it when they've just before a presentation, and they've all said this really helps. And I think if it's good enough for the Navy SEALs, right?
Absolutely. Let's have some of that. Yes.
Absolutely. But I think that's the thing. It's the key is to calm your body down, and then the calming the mind is, if you want to do something to calm your mind, I would suggest you try meditation, but do it with a guide, so a guided meditation to sort of walk you through, so you're not lost in your own thoughts, and also mantras.
Mm.
So mantras can then take the pressure off your thinking. You just have to repeat the mantra. But the other thing I would say is, don't fight the process. Don't beat yourself up if you don't get it absolutely right. There's a lovely book called I May Be Wrong, um, uh, by Bjorn Lindberg. I can't remember the full name, but his whole premise of that book, called I May Be Wrong, was don't believe your every thought. And he said that when he was meditating, sometimes his thoughts would drift. It's impossible to switch your mind off. So don't even try.
Mm.
Allow it. Don't fight it. And I think this is the thing with high performing anxiety, is you're constantly in battle mode. Under the water, you are paddling away really fast. So it's about allowing that to slow down.
I always find as well, when I manage to slow down, that's when the really good idea pops into my mind
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
It's why we all have brilliant ideas in the shower.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to do. So there's nothing else to focus on. So that's when the creativity comes up. And I think they've even got whiteboards now for showers, so people can write down, what comes to them, which is such a brilliant idea. But I think it's true. It's, when you're out walking, you're allowing the creativity of your brain to sort of come forth, um, and bring the ideas.
And how can friends and family support someone with high performing anxiety?
Well, again, I think it's about knowledge. It's about knowing that that is going on. So it's looking for telltale signs, really, if they change in their sort of behavior, or they are uh, not communicative about how they're feeling. It's about asking questions, and it's asking the right questions. In fact, I love this because I think we're all encouraged these days to talk more, but I wish they took that to the extent that we need to talk about the right things more, because I think we can all do small talk and, talk about the weather and that, but actually, how many times a day do you actually say to somebody, how are you?
Mm.
And actually mean it.
Mm.
Be prepared to listen to the answer, because sometimes people just want that doorway to be open so that they can then say, oh, I'm struggling. But actually, if you don't ask the right question, or if you don't ask it in a way that shows that you really want to hear the answer, then you might as well not said it at all.
Yes, do wait for the answer. I think that also when people talk about things, that in itself can actually relieve some of the weight,
Yes.
just expressing it in the open with somebody else without any immediate solutions. The act of talking in itself can be very healing.
Yes. And I think it's important not trying to fix it either,
Mm.
because I mean, I was a real problem solver when I was, working in my first business. I wanted to fix everything. But actually, I've come to find that sometimes people just need you to be with them, to listen, to
Yeah.
hear them. And actually, coaching shows you that you don't need to give anybody solutions. They can find them for themselves. You just sometimes need to facilitate that with the right questions.
Yeah. Do you find that women or men are more likely to experience high performing anxiety, or do they express it differently?
I think I think they probably both do
Yeah.
equally. I mean, I've worked with both men and women, and I've seen it in different ways that it manifests. I think with men, it might manifest more in overworking. So they might show up, in terms of working in the evening and so on. And they may have the pressures of feeling like they should be the breadwinner and so on, all the old sort of paradigms. I think women are more likely to talk about it
Mm,
and admit it. I find with when I'm working with my clients that often it's the first or the second session that women might say and talk about it. With the men, it's more likely to be later down the line, sort of the third or the fourth session, it starts to come up to the surface. And it may well be that there's this impression that men have that they must be stronger,
mm,
so not show any. And I think that comes in with the high performing anxiety. You're not to show any chinks in the armor. You've got to be strong. You've got to,
yeah.
show and perform as somebody who's in control and capable.
And I think women can very much feel that too if they're in a leadership role,
Yes,
particularly when something's hitting the proverbial fan, that they've got to be the leader and lead everybody through it. And that to a certain extent is true. But I think that it can encourage the swan situation.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think, it showed up in the media recently, didn't it, with Rachel Reeves when she was crying that,
Yeah.
they had an absolute field day with her. And I felt so sad because I just thought there's somebody who's being really honest about their feelings and showing them, and she's pilloried. And I just
Mm,
think, what a shame.
mm,
We should be celebrating that because this is so important that we know that emotions are there for a reason. They're a signpost. They're showing you where you are in relation to where you want to be. And they are good for us.
mm.
And I think that the more we can show our emotions, the better the world will be.
Or at the very least, acknowledge our feelings.
Yes,
Mm.
yes.
We're coming into the final furlong now. If you could leave listeners with one message, what would it be?
Don't struggle alone.
Hmm.
Go ask for help, which is really hard when you're a when you've got high performing anxiety, you think you need to do it all yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's that know that people want to help you. And I think if you think about your own self, you want to help other people
Mm,
in the main. If you had a friend who was struggling, then you'd want to help them, but you need to know if they're struggling. So know that people do want to help you. You just got to make that first move sometimes. If you're doing a good job of covering it up, then they're never going to know.
mm.
Just take that step.
One thing I find really interesting as well is that if you look at really top performing sports people, really top performing business people, invariably, if you dig a bit deeper, they all have mentors.
Yes. Yeah.
And some have several mentors. And yet they're really, really high performing, really right at the top, and yet they still have a mentor. And I think that is something for us all to learn, that can be a very useful way forward. Because particularly if you're right at the top of something, that can be a very lonely place.
I think it can be very isolating
Yeah.
because there's that. I mean, I remember myself feeling like nobody understands, nobody knows what this feels like, and you can get yourself into very much a victim, mentality. It's like nobody understands me, nobody can help. But actually, like you say, there's plenty of people around who have probably been in the same position as you or very similar that can help and would be willing to help. I think we just sometimes have to take that first step.
Mm.
But acknowledging it is right. You're absolutely right. First of all, you have to acknowledge what's going on for yourself, and then looking at, and the point you made about all the top performers having mentors and so on, it shows we're never complete.
Yes, absolutely. Always growing,
There's
always
always
growing.
something to learn.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I think also when you look at like top business people who are very, very successful, invariably at certain points in their career, they hit a curveball and something didn't go right, but they use that as a learning experience rather than something to worry about and to beat themselves up about. It was learning to be even more successful going forward. And they learned as much in the quote failure than they have done in the success.
Yes, and I think the genius of that is being able to learn almost as soon as it has happened rather
Yeah.
than years later when you can kind of look with hindsight and go, oh, I understand why that happened. And yes, I did become better because of it. But actually it's having that resilience and that kind of peace of mind to be able to say, oh, I can see what's happening. One of the things I read when I was going through this was life is happening for you, not to you.
I love that phrase. Yes.
And I think that helped me in the moment to see what's for me here, what's the gift here for me.
Yeah.
And that really helped me to look at when things seem to be going wrong, or, how could I see this differently? How could I see that this could actually be going right for me? Or not even define it in terms of right and wrong, but to see that this is for me.
Mm. If you look at inventors, for example, the inventor of the light bulb,
Hmm.
he failed hundreds of times before he got a light bulb that would actually work.
Yeah.
And yet look at how commonplace light bulbs are these days.
Yes. How much we take them for granted.
Absolutely. All that hard work.
Yeah.
It's been lovely chatting with you, Amanda. How can people get in touch with you if they would like some coaching or find out more about your work?
So the best place probably would be go to my website. And if anybody is there listening and they are somebody who feels that they look successful on the outside, but they don't feel it on the inside, I've actually prepared a bundle, which if you go to my website and go to my contact page and just comment subscribe, I will send it to you. And it's called the High Achievers Paradox Guide, and it's a guide about what that is. It's also there's a future self visualization in there and some really key coaching questions that you can ask yourself to dig deeper into your own situation.
And your website is?
It's happycoach.co.uk.
Lovely. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure, Alison. Thank you.
And finally, a request, please. I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to this channel and like my videos. That would be a huge help. Thank you.